John, thanks for coming in. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. I did not know I was the first repeat guest, and I'm just honored to hold that distinction.
Yeah. It's been, we've been on the air for more than, more than 4 months, going on 5 months, and we haven't had any repeat guests yet, so you're the first one. Awesome. So, I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today.
It's always a pleasure to be here.
Good deal. So, one of the thing that you kind of centered in our last discussion was your big thing in this campaign is kind of the quality of life for citizens in Huntsville City Council District 5. You talked about some of the zoning issues with Limestone in Madison County and the 911 calls. And if you could kind of just give us just a real quick overview of the situation, again, for listeners that may not have heard that first interview. If you haven't, you can always go back and search John Meredith on our YouTube page. You can go back and find that interview there. But just give us a short overview of the situation there, and then a question that I had about that is, why do you think it is that nothing has happened on those issues yet? You know, presumably Culver is aware of these issues. Presumably this is something that gets brought up to him a lot when he talks to constituents. You sound like really kind of, when you talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like these are pretty base level things. Yes. Like, why have they not been fixed?
For lack of political will. If the council person in District 5 made those issues a priority, they would be a priority. The Limestone County water issue is certainly one that should have moved since I ran against him in 2016. That was an issue that was raised and I brought to everyone's attention. And Mr. Culver, through the use of the Huntsville City Council city attorney at the time, got a meeting with the Limestone County supervisor to talk about Limestone County residential water service delivery. I would guarantee you that he has not had a single meeting since. And I mean, you can check on that. The viewers or the listeners rather can check on that. I doubt seriously if there has ever been another meeting. And that is because the priorities of Mr. Culver are not reflective of the larger community. Another example is Zert Road. His entire 12-year tenure, we have been trying to get 3 miles of Zert Road paved. It is still not a completed project. He told us in 2016 it would be completed in 2020. I'm sorry, in 2018. It is now 2020. Road's still not finished. They put in a road over a mountain, Cecil Ashburn, in less time than it is taken to do 3 miles of flat dirt road. Yeah. That is because it's not a priority of the councilman. If the councilman said, hey, I'm going to start holding things up until you fix this street, our street would be fixed. He's not willing to do that. And, you know, you hear him speak at town halls and other things, and he's talking about the issue of the number of downtown hotel rooms. Well, when you're going over a road in your neighborhood that needs to be resurfaced, you don't care about the number of downtown hotel rooms. Right. When you have people that come visit you and your relatives, they're staying in hotels close to your home. They're not in downtown hotel rooms. Mm-hmm. And these are the disjointedness of the priorities of our current councilmen versus those of the district. And it's not just west versus north. Folks in the north are being just as ignored as folks in the west. Universally, the biggest issue constituents have is the lack of accessibility. He won't return a phone call. He won't return an email. He won't address your issues. He won't provide you an opportunity as a constituent to voice your opinion and what you think about an issue. I will change that. I'll be in City Hall 3 days a week. If by chance you send me an email and it falls through the cracks and I don't return it, come down to City Hall and yell at me about it. Say, hey, man, I sent you an email. How come you didn't return it? I'm going to be accessible. I'm going to be transparent. The city council wage increase caught constituents totally by surprise. This road surfacing money that he wanted to give away caught constituents totally by surprise. When Pam Hill had to resign because of health concerns, she was the District 5 school board member. Will Culver seemed to have not cared less about her being replaced. That fell on Francis Akridge and Devin Keith to replace the District 5 school board member. Now, he's running on a platform of being all about education.
Right.
Well, how can you sit back and not play any role in replacing the district school board rep if you care about education?
Right.
Those are some of the most tangible differences between me and the incumbent.
Right. You know, I was riding with my father one day, and we were going out to lunch, and I drove past one of his big signs on Jordan Lane that said, and I just started laughing out loud. My dad didn't get it, of course, but it said, you know, Will Culver, a quiet force for good, maybe, I can't, but a quiet force, I remember that.
Yes.
And like, what do you think about his like campaign slogan there? He's like really leaning into the fact that nobody knows that he's doing anything.
You know, that I appreciate the opportunity, the softball for a very poignant quip or attack on Mr. Culver. But I'm going to leave that alone.
Okay.
I'm going to let the audience go with that. But I will say, if you believe that as a constituent of District 5, you want a quiet representative, that's your guy.
Right.
If you want somebody that's going to fight tooth and nail to make sure that District 5 gets its, quote, fair share of things, and that District 5 in less than 4 years every neighborhood in District 5 can see a tangible increase in their standard of living or their quality of life, more specifically, I'm your guy. Right. I'm going to be the bull in the china shop when it comes to bringing home the bacon, for lack of a better term, for District 5 residents.
Right.
There will be no quiet storm with me. I'm going to be a loud and boisterous presence.
And, you know, I think that's a lot of, you know, that's what a lot of folks want. And a lot of the listeners of this station, you know, a lot of the listeners of this station are Trump voters. And that is what they always said that they wanted, right? They always said that they wanted they wanted a bull in a china shop. And that's why they voted for Trump, and because he was going to shake things up. And, you know, whether or not he actually does that is another question that I'll leave for another day. But, you know, that's something to consider, definitely.
I'll chime in. You know, it's funny. I had an affiliation with the GOP, as many know, and it's funny that I'm no longer in that party because of their willingness to follow one bull versus another.
Right.
Me as a bull, I believe firmly that I've stood firm on my principles. That nothing has changed. When I opposed the unattended minor policies under Obama, Republicans loved me. When I spoke out against family separation, putting those kids in cages under Trump, I became this anathema to the party. But I was standing firm on the same principle. If it is bad for President Obama to deal with unaccompanied minors that way, well, it's even worse when the Republicans rip families apart to treat those minors the same way and worse. And if Republicans can't see the ambiguity in their position, I'm sorry. But as that bull who's standing on moral principles, if you don't treat children and asylum seekers that way, I'm sorry.
Right.
Asylum seeking is international law. The fact that Donald Trump doesn't want to accept that international law does not make what he's doing right.
Right. You know, you mentioned your affiliation with the Republican Party, and my understanding is that District 5 is a majority-minority district. Is that correct?
Yes, but the demographics are changing, and one could basically make the argument that it is quickly turning blue. But if you rearrange the district like many would like to see, we'd like to see the city council move from 5 to 7. Some of those unique issues will not necessarily be unique amongst the newly drawn district, but there are major distinctions now between what is the entire 5th district. You take North Huntsville, and it is overwhelmingly Democratic, overwhelmingly minority, although it is not all black or Hispanic. There are plenty of white people that live there as well.
Right.
The West tends to have started out more, we'll say white, but they're through all sorts of things, including the BRAC. It is growing in leaps and bounds, and pretty much every neighborhood, at least that I'm aware of out there, is mixed. Mixed, not just black and white, but Hispanic, Asian. In my community, there's everything possible. Religious differences as well. So we are that melting pot out there. But yeah, I think you're right. But that gap is the demographics are quickly changing in what is the 5th district.
And the reason that I asked about this, and we're coming up on a break, and so I'm going to pose the question now, and we'll answer it on the other side. But the reason that I mentioned that is because, like everybody knows, most people in the black community are Democrats, and they have a very, they are very distrustful of Republicans, and with good reason.
Yes.
And so on the other side of the break, I want you to kind of talk to, there are undoubtedly people in your community that are like, they're like, why did it take him so long to get out of the Republican Party? Why did he not see what we saw? Like, why should they trust you as a former Republican and cast their vote for you when they have seen Republicans and Democrats, but definitely Republicans, beating down on them for so long?
You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
Welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison. I am in the studio with John Meredith. He is running for Huntsville City Council District 5, and we appreciate his time today. Before the break, before we went into the break, I posed the question to him: why should his constituents, the people that there are people in his district, no doubt, that really distrust the Republican Party? And I don't think I've seen this question posed to you, at least not in this way. And so I thought I would ask it. Why should people that distrust the Republican Party, that have seen them harm their communities, why should they trust that why should they trust you when it took you so long to kind of come out of the Republican Party? I could see how that would kind of cause some consternation among some of them. So what would be, like, if you were talking to one of them, like, what would you say?
I would say that me being a Republican is something that was news to me, just like it was to everyone else. I've never lived in a state where I've had to declare a party. So I've never been a registered Republican. I've never been part of any Republican structure, no committees, no anything. I got dubbed a Republican by a newly launching at the time conservative news site called Newsmax, that created a list of 100 black influential Republicans. No one ever called me about that article. No one ever asked me if it was okay to list me, if I considered myself a Republican or anything. They just printed it. I can see how they got there, right. But every policy that I worked on in Congress was bipartisan. I would sit down when I did guest worker programs for the non-agricultural sector. We sat down with the AFL-CIO and ironed out a proposal that Congress passed without a single vote against it. That bill was championed by Zoe Lofgren, a Democrat. I raised a lot of money for Zoe Lofgren, a Democrat. If you called her office today, I'm sure even 10, 12 years later, they will remember me. I worked with Nydia Velasquez, the chairman, current chairman, but at the time ranking member of the Small Business Committee, a Democrat from New York. Raised a boatload of money for her, worked for her on a lot of different issues. Democrats have always been within my purview. My father was a conservative. My mother was a card-carrying union member public school teacher. I have always valued both sides. I have always worked on issues where the other side got something as well, and we presented our solution to Congress unified, Democrat and Republican, conservative and liberal. We all work together. I've always been collaborative. The advantage of rolling as a Republican, if you will, was they're in control.
Right.
I was able to make sure that the policies, or the most important thing anyway, to Democrats showed up in those Republican authored bills. So you can trust me. I'm the same guy.
Right.
Again, the same guy. It doesn't matter to me if a Democrat has a good policy. I'm going to back it, and I'm going to use those Democrats to get it across the finish line. If the Republicans have a good idea, I'm going to go with that, and I'm going to get it across the finish line. Because good policy doesn't have a party. Good policy means it's going to help the most people regardless of how they are, and that's what I'm about, helping the most people do better in America.
Right. I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think that most people would understand that, especially the thing that you mentioned about rolling with the Republican Party, because they're the people that are in power, and so that makes a lot of sense. And I've actually I have in the past kind of kicked myself because I have in the past so publicly aligned with the Democratic Party. Like I thought that it would be, for any enterprising young person out there who has not been particularly public with their political affiliations, maybe you could try this, but I thought that it would be a good idea to maybe, be a Republican publicly, but be like a radical Republican, like the ones, like the abolitionists, or like the ones during Andrew Jackson's day. When Andrew Jackson was the Democratic presidential candidate, there was a strong cohort of like radical Republicans is what they were called, and they were like progressive, and some of them were socialists, and they put forward a very progressive agenda that would have helped a lot of people. And if you could do that in Alabama, that you probably make a lot more headway than you would running as a Democrat. So
well, the one thing I'll say about it to really to all, but I was going to say the Democrats that have doubt. I suspect that at this point in North Alabama, there's no one hated by the Republican Party more than me. So if that means anything to you, I'm your guy, because the Republican Party has pretty much had it with me standing up for what's right in the era of Trump. I guess I'm the only one in North Alabama that said he was never Trump and actually meant never Trump. Right. It's not never Trump until he gets elected. It's never Trump.
Yeah, I if you listen to this station very much, you would know that. So the national politics and even statewide politics, to a certain extent, we can kind of set aside further. I want to take you into a third segment. Is that okay?
Yeah, that'd be fine.
But because a lot of that is almost immaterial to what's going to be happening in your district. And so one of the things that I know that a lot of people have asked me about is the general schedule for city employees. In 2018, the general schedule was cut for entry level by more than 2%, and the steps were cut as well. There are 7 steps, and each step was a 5% raise, and that was taken down to a 3% raise. And COLAs have only been 1%, which is not an actual COLA. And so what has happened with the general schedule is that they removed they made the cap higher, but they cut every step along the way. And so in 30 years, you could be making more potentially as a 30-year employee than you could now. But on the way to getting there, you're looking at $45,000 less over a career of service. And a lot of people don't spend 30 or 40 or 50 years with the city government, with the municipal government. They want to have a 25 or 30 year career, and then be able to retire. And so I want to ask you about what your opinions on the general schedule and your opinions on the RSA moving back into Tier 1 on the other side of this break. So stay tuned. You're listening to the Valley Labor Report. Welcome back to the Valley Labor Report. My name is Jacob Morrison, holding down the fort by myself today. David is on the road doing that good union work, working for the working families of Alabama. Thank you, David. Safe travels. Talking to John Meredith. He is running for Huntsville City Council District 5. The runoff is on Tuesday. We had somebody call in just a second ago, and I was like wrapping it up, and I couldn't answer the phone because I was wrapping it up, running the board by myself. But if you want to call back in, you can do that now, 1-866-494-9866. But when I left off, I was asking John about the general schedule and how it was cut, and how that's going to amount to tens of thousands of dollars less for city employees. And additionally, I alluded to, and I'll kind of I'll expand on that a little bit more. The RSA program, a while back, cities had to, or cities went to a Tier 2 system, and the state has recently allowed cities to go back to a Tier 1 system. And Huntsville is one of the last holdouts for to move back to the Tier 1 system. And the difference is, I mean, really astounding. You're looking at Tier 2 is the average of the highest 5 years of the last 10 years service, whereas Tier 1 is the average of the last 3. There's no sick leave conversion in Tier 2 versus there is in Tier 1. It takes longer to get your full benefits. The multiplier rate is lower. I mean, like, everything about Tier 2 is lower, and Huntsville has refused, one of the last cities in Alabama has refused to go back to Tier 1 because the city is saying the money isn't there, but they've got money to give tax breaks to corporations so that they can move here and set up shop here, and they've got money for this thing and that thing, but they don't have money for their workers. And so can you talk about, would you support going back to the old general schedule and then tying that to inflation so that future councils can't cut wages via inaction? That's one of the things that I have found that really, like, riles me up, because the default when you don't have wages set to inflation is that wages are going to be cut. And so would you support going back to the old system where their wages were higher and tying that to inflation? And would you support going to the RSA Tier 1?
I'm drinking through a fire hose now of information that you've just put down. Although I will be honest and share that I've had discussions with the firefighters about this, and it came up earlier this week on social media. Although that was far less explicative of than you. From what I know right now, I certainly support that change back. I will certainly support city workers at every opportunity that I can. That said, I am undereducated on the issue, and I need to know what the other side has to say, because it obviously, I think, I was about to say I know, but I think the reason it was changed was for the city to be more fiscally responsible. Now, if I know moving back, at least I think moving back is going to have an initial price tag on it. And right now, with the COVID and city coffers declining, may not be the perfect time to take on another financial obligation. But once the new normal is established and we know what our budget, and we can start predicting the city budget again, I think would be probably a better time to look at that. But it's about sustainability. After we take that initial hit, can we sustain the levels that we're going to have to match moving forward once we change back? If it's sustainable, I absolutely would vote for it.
Right.
If it isn't sustainable, I would try to find other avenues to augment employee salaries to make up for that. It's not going to complete the gap, but it'll add something to them to make up for what we couldn't do on the retirement side.
Okay. So there are, obviously I'm concerned with city employees, but most workers in Huntsville are not city employees. Most workers in Huntsville work in the private sector. And something that we know that happens in the private sector, or that I know that happens in the private sector, because this is kind of like, this is my bailiwick, labor rights and stuff, is that non-compliance with wage and worker protection laws persists at an extremely high level throughout the country. And in fact, wage theft accounts for more in dollars stolen than all property crime combined. Despite this, there are almost no resources devoted to fighting wage theft. We've got, we pay police salaries, we pay investigation units, we pay like investigators to like look into property crime and try to solve property crime and all of these things, and that's good, and we need to do that. But we don't do that for wage theft. And, the harms of wage theft obviously extend beyond their immediate victims. They reduce taxable income. They exert downward pressure on the wages of all workers in the affected industries. And law-abiding business owners are also harmed as their competitors unlawfully trim labor costs. So what steps and wage theft, what that looks like is people doing labor off the clock, like that's just kind of the unspoken thing that, you clock out. And I remember having to do this in a restaurant. You clock out and then you do your side work, or you work overtime and they don't pay you time and a half, or they put you, there are all kinds of ways to get around wage laws that employers use a lot. And so, have you put any thought into steps that the city could take towards eliminating wage theft, or actually putting resources into fighting wage theft and fostering an environment of worker protections throughout Huntsville?
To be honest, no. Wage theft is something I hadn't thought about on a local level. I'm fully aware of what you're talking about. I've dealt with it on a national level, and any answer I could provide right now, just as a knee-jerk reaction, would involve the Fed and not the local government. So I apologize for that. But that said, I've long-standing positions on, I think that servers should be paid minimum wage. I think it's still $1.90 an hour for servers. I mean, $2.13. That's ridiculous. Yeah.
I remember getting those $0 checks.
Right. So, things like that are more low-hanging fruit, and I think a councilman can certainly address some of those issues. And I think let's work on that low-hanging fruit first. Wage theft. Frankly, it would need to be, I think, a department either within the police force or within city government. But if it's done within city government, the best way to do it is to create something new that it's exclusively its mission. And I haven't weighed in with anybody that's currently an office holder about the possibility of that happening.
Right. And I think that you're right. I think that's what it would take. And I think that it is a sad commentary on the relative worth of workers that we don't have. Like people just don't think about it. Politicians don't think about it. Well, the bosses think about it, and they're glad for the situation that we have now. But like I said, like wage theft accounts for more dollars stolen from people than all property crime combined. And, so this is a huge issue. It takes millions, billions of dollars out of the pockets of working people every year. And so, I'd love to see a city government that is proactive about fighting for workers to get money that they earned.
To be honest, one of the biggest holdups, and I know this is going to upset the business community, and I apologize. I have your back too, but being a right-to-work state, which is essentially nothing more than a right-to-fire state, certainly feeds into wage theft, because you're not going to tell your employer who has the right to fire you at any turn,
Right.
what do you mean clock out and then do my side work? I'm not doing that. You can't do that. Otherwise, he fires you and you've lost your job.
Well, now what you're speaking to there is at-will employment versus right to work. Those are two different things, and they get confused a lot.
Thank you, because I'm obviously confused.
Yes.
But yeah.
Or they get tied in. They get tied. Like, people think that the two things are the same thing, and they're not. At-will employment means that you can be fired at any time for any reason. Basically, right to work means that you don't have to. A union cannot bargain for a clause in the contract that says that agency fees must be collected from all employees in a workplace that's represented by the union, so you can have freeloaders and stuff like that.
Well, thank you for that explanation. Now I'm good to go now.
But we are both a right to work
too.
Right, we're both a right to work and an at-will employment state. So it's like
double whammy.
Yeah, double whammy. Got a couple more minutes here.
While we're talking about that, let me just say that since the last time coming on this show, and your discussion about how the city won't deal with unions and they force you to get a business, and then it ups the 10%. I will certainly look into that, because that's not good for taxpayers. You're inflating everything the taxpayer pays by 10%, and that's not good. That could go to the retirement system. I mean, that.
And I did mention that. I couldn't believe that the city of Huntsville didn't have to follow OSHA requirements, and I looked into that since then, and that is actually true. City and municipal and state governments are exempt from OSHA, and so they don't have to, and Huntsville does not follow OSHA. But with the last 30 seconds here, this is a pretty quick question. Yes, Huntsville has a larger racial disparity for enforcement of marijuana prohibition than any other city in Alabama. Would you support measures to effectively decriminalize marijuana within the city of Huntsville?
I would be on board for that. I could not champion that. It gets complicated, as you well know. But I think right now that the penalties for it are just out of whack. And for folks' future lives to be so negatively impacted, frankly, over very, very small amounts, let alone the racial disparity, I would vote for it, but I would leave that up to someone else to champion that cause. Okay. I've got too many other tangibles to deliver.
Right. I'll say I don't think that it's complicated. I think that it's pretty simple, but we'll leave it there. John Meredith, where can people find you?
I can be found on the World Wide Web at votejohnmeredith.com. I can be found on Facebook at John Meredith for Huntsville City Council. And again, please be sure to vote on Tuesday, October the 6th.
You're listening to the Valley Labor Report with David Story and Jacob Morrison.
I want to thank everybody for tuning in. We appreciate your time today. If you want to see what we're up to throughout the week, get our snide quips about the news of the day, then you should follow us on social media. We're on Facebook at facebook.com/Valley Labor Report. We're on Twitter at Labor Reporters. I'm on Twitter at JacobM_AL. David is on Twitter at Radical Unionist. That is spelled RADICL Unionist. If you missed part of the show and want to go back and watch it later, you can search YouTube for The Valley Labor Report and subscribe to our channel. You can go back and watch the full show there, and we also clip segments throughout the week. And we also upload the program on more than 11 different podcasting apps. So you can see if we are on your listening platform of choice. Go to thevalleylaborreport.transistor.fm/subscribe. And if you appreciate our work and want to help us stay on the air, then consider throwing us a couple dollars a month on patreon.com/The Valley Labor Report.